How are you, Casey?
I'm good. I'm good. Here with you recording on Valentine's Day, which is fun.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Happy Valentine's Day.
It's the end of your day, I suppose. It's the beginning of mine.
Yes. Do you have a Valentine?
Do I have a Valentine? Yes, I have two, a partner and a 6-month-old baby who you might hear in the background. So if there's in the distance some screaming or other chatting, that's obviously not from me. It's 6-month-old Robin.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I also have two. I have a person and also a black cat who likes to pipe up when I get on talking to other people at this time of the night. So hopefully that will probably sound a lot like your baby when your baby's upset.
Gosh, and I do have a little dog who I feel bad now about forgetting, but that is what happens when you have a kid, that they just get a little downgraded.
Oh, it's kind of a big deal. It's kind of overwhelming. Well, congratulations. This is one of those conversations that are interesting to me, because the only reason I'm talking to you is because early on when I launched Hot Flash, I came across MK Suriak, who had launched the Menopause, a comic treatment, which was just about the coolest thing I'd seen. Just such an original thing, and won lots of awards. And then she had mentioned you in an interview, and so I tucked it away. So I'm really excited to talk to you.
Oh, thank you. This is I've been thinking about it leading up to this conversation, and as a trans man, certainly in early stages of my transition, there's no way in hell that I would talk to you or anybody, or just this would have felt like I just wasn't ready to do that, to sort of talk about anything sort of related to femininity, because I was grappling with that in terms of how the world was seeing me and how I was seeing myself. And then even just something like, I was like, I'm gonna wear my one pink hoodie today because that's a color I didn't wear for like 25 years. And then now I'm like, well, I get to do this again. I'm going to reclaim this, because as a kid, I had a pink room and everything was sort of, girlified. And I was sort of, put in that box, as many, young people raised as girls are. So I just rejected that so hard. And then now I'm in this place where I feel comfortable in who I am, and able to talk about things like periods and menopause, and I can wear pink and still be okay. But I wasn't, for quite some time.
Is that the time that's passed, the work you've done, the age you are?
I think it's all of that. And also, frankly, I think part of it is becoming a parent, because that is something that has made me way tougher than I've ever been in my whole life. You just have to be. And so, like, things that used to bother me before, little smaller stuff, like, I'm a professor and yet I fear public speaking. And now it's like, I don't even have time to be worried about public speaking, because I just am going to do it. And then I just have to move on because there's so much to do. My priorities are different. So part of it is sort of that. Part of it's being 41. But mostly it's being at this point 6+ years into hormonal transition, and just being recognized in the world as I move through the world as a man, and having a lot of practice actually in speaking openly with people, including my students, about being trans. But that when I made that comic, I wasn't quite in that place. And so that really helped me. MK's invitation, and my teacher, Linda Berry, who I made that comic for, she said, hey, MK is doing this anthology, and I'm going to put a comic in there. And, this one that you've done, you might just send it to her and see. And the nice thing about a book is that there is distance, and it takes a lot of time to put a book together. So it's like, I made this comic, and eventually it'll be in a book, and then eventually people will read it, but I'm not going to be there while they read it. So they can have their own experience, and I can just be a little separate. It's not a photo essay. And so that was sort of like, that felt like a vulnerable moment. But again, the nice thing about a book is that people get to have their own experience in their own space on their own time. And it's less about those of us who make the book, I think, than the people who read it.
Can you, I mean, this is an auditory experience, but can you describe cycles?
Oh yeah, sure. So I'm a professor and I'm a cartoonist, and I teach communication, but I end up talking about trans stuff all the time, in part because people I know are like, hey, I'm teaching this class on family communication or on health or gender in some way. And then I end up talking, visiting to talk about maybe storytelling and transness. And there was a class, a friend of mine was teaching, Kelly Jakes at Wayne State University. And I always love the questions. I tell groups of students that I'm talking to, I'm happy to talk about, you can ask me anything. I mean, you shouldn't generally ask trans people like anything, but feel free to, because if you have a question that, if I don't want to answer it, I'll tell you. And often they will ask very insightful and interesting questions. And there was just a student who said to me, well, how does it feel to go from a body that cycles to one that doesn't? And I had literally never thought about that. I mean, my experience had been, as it is for many people who go on testosterone, a few months in, periods are gone. And you're experiencing a lot of physical stuff, like as your hormones are shifting. I mean, it's like massive. So I just had that experience, and then I was just grateful to kind of be on the other side. And this was a couple years in, but I had truly never appreciated that part of my body. I had never thought about it. I had never thought about going from a body that sort of worked on a cycle in that way. Not to say that all bodies, of course, have different kinds of cycles, but I just hadn't thought about how that had been with me for so many years of my life. And then it was gone. And then now every day is the same in a lot of ways, physically. That is very different. And so it sort of blew my mind that question. I just was sort of like, I don't know what to do with this. So then I made a comic about it from that experience, and just thinking back to, just feeling freaked out and devastated and, awkward about getting a period for the first time. And then, realizing over the years, like moving further, like who I am, like as a trans person, that became a really, not only like physically painful, certainly, but like an emotionally, like really awful thing to try to deal with, because it's just a visceral reminder that who I am, who I'm trying to be, who I understand myself to be, is like not true. So, and I actually haven't even probably fully unpacked that, but in the comic, I'm, going from starting with that question asked by a stranger on Zoom, to thinking back through, what is it like to like relate to our bodies and when we don't, and still this question, I think, it is sort of odd to have just a rhythm that's not there anymore, even if I hadn't appreciated it. Certainly, like our bodies remember.
Oh,
yeah.
And you didn't probably get to know when the last one was.
No, it's like right. It's just, it's there and then it's not. And then, of course, there are various times when, I mean, depending, like, of course, I guess this will be my disclaimer, like all trans people are different, and not all people take hormones, certainly. And not all people have the relationship with their body that's similar to what I'm describing either. Especially younger people. I think they're a little more free in a lot of ways.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I just see a lot more freedom, and they don't have to be quite, or they seem to just have more freedom to play, or to, like if they're going to identify as male and have a male name, that doesn't mean that they have to look as butch and masculine as possible. Like they can wear eyeliner and they can have longer hair. Like, wow, what would that even be like? I don't know. I can't even imagine myself there.
Right.
But yeah,
like what really struck me was a lot of people listening to this will be like, okay, so you had your period every month and that was a horrible reminder and that was painful, but then the rest of the time would be fine. But then you said it's like you had one day that was awesome and then you just would start to dread it.
Yeah.
Which I think,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, it would just start the clock, like, like the best day of the month would be the day after having a period, and feeling the best, but then knowing like, yeah, there's like a descending clock again. And especially, once start, and it can be, again, it really depends on where people live, of course, and what kind of medical access they have. But without having a hysterectomy also, I mean, if you go off of hormones for a couple of weeks, it comes right back. So there's, depending on how old you are in your own particular body, but many people do experience that, or if you change a dosage or maybe use a different form. So anyway, there have been recurrences.
Okay.
For me, but yeah, it really is. There are so many like daily reminders, especially pre-transition, being called ma'am and just being ladies, girls, no matter how I presented myself or an ID that didn't match the name that I use. So before you get all the things in line, I mean, going through the day, it can be a bunch of minefields. And it can be hard to find places where you are seen as and like honored as who you are. But that's still kind of external. But then a period, it was just, it's you can't, it's right there. And that is, I guess I still don't even quite have the words to describe it.
Well, I'm almost imagining when you have something like when you have like a yeast infection or something, and you're just like, I don't want this. Like, I want this to go away now. I don't want this to be happening. Like, that's right. Kind of it. I'm not comparing them at all, but just when your brain's like, no, I don't want this. And it's happening.
Right. And there's no, I mean, you can dissociate,
there's no medication. There's nothing.
But there's no way out.
Yeah.
There's no way out of that. And I also, I remember when I first started hormones, I had a friend who said, basically what you're going to experience for a little while is like going through puberty and menopause at the same time. It's like,
amazing.
Oh, great. And at some point it's like, you can't necessarily parse the two, but hot flashes, sleeplessness, anxiety, crazy mood swings, wild mood swings. But again, for such a shorter time than what most women deal with, from what I understand, which can be, I mean, a huge range, right?
Oh God, yeah. I think for me, it's been 10 years, almost ending. But so just going back, I'm just curious, did you always know? Did you always feel uncomfortable in your body? Did you always know, but maybe didn't have, how did you feel as a kid?
I'm still not sure. Actually, I'm not sure. I definitely am not one of the stories where, I was 3 years old and I always knew.
Yeah.
Which is sort of the stereotypical story, or born into the wrong body, which is of course like not a great way to relate to, what if we say no bodies are wrong? Then maybe you just have a trans body.
Right. Right.
So at some point, I mean, I did have a feeling of being different and just lack of representation. So it's like, here's who you are. That is just who you are. Like you're a girl. So is your sister. And, that's like the society's options. And then a little, I mean, I guess around middle school, and I dated men, boys through high school and into the first part of college. But I did always have this sense of feeling different, and I didn't necessarily know in what way. And then at some point I realized like, I think I'm I think I'm a lesbian, and that made a lot of sense for me for a long time, like starting later. And then, so I mean, I just don't know, like,
Mhm.
if I were growing up in this era, seeing representation, would I know sooner who I was? I also think it's important for people to know that not all trans people have that early origin story, a very black and white sort of 100% clear situation. Like there are a lot of us who
Of course.
transition later in life, or for whom it's I don't know. I think it's just much more complex than of course, the public narrative, especially these days. But no, I didn't always know, but I really did have a sense of being different. And I had a set like an of queerness, but
Okay.
just not exactly what that looked like. I remember finding a Parents magazine. And I always used to read the Parents magazine as a kid, any magazine, frankly.
Like Parents magazine, you mean? Like the
Yeah.
magazine that's called Parents? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that one. And I remember, yeah, you can hear that baby. So there was an article, and I haven't been able to, I should look in the archives at some point, but in my memory, I was probably like 7 or 8. In my memory, it was, what do you do if your kid is gay? And the way that, I don't know how much of many of the words I'm reading, but I'm seeing pictures, and I am, the clear message to me as a kid is, you don't want to be gay. That's a bad thing. It's like, what do you do if your kid has leukemia? It's like something tragic. So there were a lot of like little societal messages like that. And so I don't know how much of like what else I've suppressed, frankly,
Right.
I'm excited to do more, writing and drawing and sort of excavation to try to recover some things. But for a long time, I found like it was enough for me to be a butch lesbian in a community that really saw like a wide variety of femaleness, like quite a large, like, so you have people who are high femme and very butch masculine, and then everything in between. And that felt fine for a while, until it really didn't. And I just couldn't imagine becoming old, or becoming a parent, or becoming an aunt. I couldn't imagine myself as an older woman at all. If I could imagine myself becoming old, but when I looked in the future, I couldn't see anything there. And it just was really clear to me that, the first part of my life has been as a woman, and the second part is not going to be. And I thought about it for 10 years. I'm like a very slow process kind of person. Other people would have transitioned way sooner rather than think about it every day for a decade, which I did. So, I mean, I rushed into anything. And, a lot of young people actually ask me, like, do you regret waiting so long? Because to them, it's kind of tragic. I mean, mostly no, because I wouldn't change anything about my life. But I think that comes from being older too. Like, would I mind? I mean, physically, like, would I mind like, if you go on hormones sooner, then maybe you can have more of the physical traits that you want, body wise. But I'm okay without that. I'm okay without that. So no, yeah, I wouldn't change anything. I think it's valuable to have. I feel like I can relate to more people.
Yeah.
With this experience.
Yeah, having done, doing things in your 30s is different than doing things in your 20s. It's just, yeah, I'm a big proponent of like, there's no point in, like, where you are right now is where you are right now, and where you are because of that 5 years from now, there's no second guessing any of it, right? Because you can't.
Right.
Do you have any idea of what menopause might involve or fear about it? Because you're 41, your body will probably go, like, do you think your body will probably go through some sort of transition? Because I do hear people speaking about this, yeah, I just wondered how you feel about that.
Well, there's the question I also have not really thought about. My assumption was at some point that I'll probably will get a hysterectomy. And in part of me wanted to, so my partner and I have been together for 15 years, and there's a little part of me that wanted to just keep everything intact just in case she wasn't able to have a baby. Even though that I would have to, I couldn't quite imagine how I could handle that. Again, like people do it. I'm not sure that could be me. And also, again, I'm 41. So yeah, part of me was like, I'm not rushing to do anything, but at some point, in part because I know that after you do have a hysterectomy, you don't need to take as much testosterone. I already actually don't even need to take a really high dosage. But if I don't need to take as much, that would also be better. And then if you're, so I just think that's a part of my future, but that is something that I hadn't thought about. If I didn't, I guess there's a lot of, I try to sort of insulate myself a little bit from this, but it is a scary time to be a trans person in the US anyways, with all of the backlash and even Trump recently talking about prohibiting all trans people of all ages, not just youth, from having any kind of gender identity related to, or that's not what's on their birth certificate. And I live in a liberal state now on purpose, where I have access to good care, but there's a little bit of me that feels quite nervous about that. And then I think about cancer risk in the future, and things like that, and then thinking I could certainly have a hysterectomy, and continue to live my life as I am. In fact, perhaps a little better, because for heart health and things like that, taking less testosterone, and then not having to worry about, like, 20 years down the line, am I going to be able to, if I have some sort of situation, will I be able to find somebody to help?
Do it.
Because I've heard stories from friends of mine who've been had awful experiences with being refused care of various kinds because of being trans, cancer specifically. And wow. I know. And then certainly, like, there's a lot of history of that before the present moment, but I still, if it's, and that some people actually feel like that they want to have hysterectomies because to feel more physically in line with their body. I don't necessarily feel that way. Actually, truly, for me, it's more about sort of also just, there's a lot of science that's not known. What's the impact of taking testosterone for decades on a uterus? They don't necessarily know. So my thought is, maybe we don't need it. I don't know. It gives me some anxiety to have a part of me that, like, you can't actually feel in the day-to-day necessarily, but that is there, and that is being impacted certainly by taking hormones. I don't know. I'm obviously not 100% medically informed.
No, but I don't think there's got to be there's no research on what happens to your ovaries and uterus after you've been on testosterone for decades. There's not barely any long-term research on menopause, for example. So I don't think they've probably got around to doing large-scale clinical trial. Like, I don't think there's anything you can look at that can make you feel better about it, probably. Right? Like, it's fine, I'm sure. It's just a lot of, I think you guys, like, you're really brave, doing this, because without knowing, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of research research isn't what it used to be these days.
Yeah, and they're really I mean, people, my dad, for one, said to me at the beginning of transition, I just don't want you to do anything that's going to shorten your life.
Right.
And I thought, well, that's so interesting because in my mind, this is extending it, you know.
Right.
But it's also true that for again, like I'm like pausing because the research piece not being there, you know, and there's a lot of big gaps when it comes to women in general in all sorts of medical research, biomedical research, and then certainly queer people. I mean, if you look at, like, we've been on this fertility journey, all of the data for artificial insemination, IUI, IVF, the data on what works, the data on the drugs is all around heterosexual people who have fertility issues. So your chances of success via IUI or IVF as a queer person without fertility challenges is actually much higher. So a lot of the just basic stats that they present, like, it doesn't count the rest of us. And I still, one part that, I mean, having a 6-month-old baby doesn't allow a lot of time for deep reflection. Anything, or comics, but it is interesting. And I'd like to put together a book eventually about this, to be a person with the uterus, who is, and then this would be true of a lesbian couple as well, but witnessing somebody go through pregnancy and childbirth and breastfeeding, and then feeling a little bit of guilt at certain moments when things are just so much more taxing on her body, or just feeling like, I know it's like I could help in some way, or like I could have done this, you did this, but I could have physically done this, so then you wouldn't necessarily have to.
Just knowing that there was a slight chance, I feel like you're alluding to the fact that there was an option there for you to help in ways that other fathers don't have, and you're like, have some emotional something about
guilt.
it. Yeah. And you've been with your partner so long, it doesn't sound like your partner. That would be pretty out of line to
yeah.
That would be an angry moment that she probably regret. Yeah, that's something else. Just going back to the research, one thing, and I haven't researched this at all because there's barely any research on menopause. But there was a presentation last year at the North American Menopause Society by Dr. Sarah Pickle, who's like one of these, people have emerged as like the sort of at the forefront of it. And when she was giving that presentation, she said that trans women take estrogen. They don't take progesterone, which I thought was so interesting. And then I've been thinking, I watched that like a couple of weeks ago, and I've just been thinking, like, I wonder why. And I'm not surprised, because even in menopause, they'll give you estrogen, they'll give you progesterone because they have to, because if they give you estrogen, it can thicken your uterine lining and increase your risk of cancer. Progesterone's sort of like, you have to take it. But progesterone has all these benefits on its own. And then this doctor that I've interviewed before, I was Googling her, and it turns out she's written a paper saying why trans women should take progesterone. And I was thinking,
interesting.
Like, that's just a gap where one person is saying we don't give progesterone, and someone over here is saying, hey, you might consider progesterone, because if estrogen's making the experience better, imagine if you added this other hormone. So that will be really interesting to watch. All of it will be interesting to watch.
And I read recently, and I won't be able to say where, but that they used to be concerned about the long-term effects for trans women of taking estrogen for a lifetime. But then in terms of cancer risk, but then it was actually progesterone over 40, 50 years that could be part of the risk.
It's a synthetic. It's the progestin seems to be part of the problem. But again, it depends who you talk to, because there's doctors who will swear up and down that's perfectly safe. That's one thing I've learned, is that if I take hormone therapy, I'll make sure it's progesterone, the bioidentical kind, not the synthetic kind,
Interesting.
because there is some research on that. But again, you can twist and turn research any way you want. That's one thing I'm finding is that you can make it say almost anything you want to.
Mhm. Well, I'm curious. I have a question for you. This is similar to the Parents Magazine moment. I remember seeing as a kid the book The Silent Passage, and about menopause.
Yep.
And that just sounded like a horror movie to me as a
It
kid.
sounds terrible.
I know, it sounds
no one there, you're all alone.
awful. So then it's like, well, this is a horrifying thing that's going to happen. That we're not going to talk about either. It's silent. And
is that
anyway,
Gail Sheehy's book? Is that Gail Sheehy's book? I think
I have no idea. I haven't read the book. I'm only talking about encountering it.
You just saw it like scary beckoning on the bookshelf, and we're like,
scared me. And then the other day, well, 2 days ago, the Super Bowl, one of the first commercials, at least here, was the menopause commercial. And I just thought, wow, like what a head turner in the last, like, I don't know, 5 years to go.
Definitely the last 2 for sure.
For
sure. Yeah.
And hearing Michelle Obama's podcast during the pandemic, she had an episode with her girlfriends on, all talking about menopause, and that sort of blew my mind that was happening. So, but then so my question for you, as someone who really is part of this increasing conversation, is what is that doing? Like, I guess, like I also think about breast cancer research and like, oh, let's just wear pink socks, and then maybe like not actually deal with equity around women's health issues, or like, so how much is like awareness versus a change in behaviors in research and care?
It's hard for me to say there. That Super Bowl commercial was a pharmaceutical company, Astellas Pharma, and it's like a stealth marketing, clever. For a drug. They have a drug coming out, a non-hormonal drug to treat hot flashes. I think it's going to be approved in a couple, like in February. So
they're capitalizing on conversations that people are having in order to sell
100%. And it was funny because
I was like, cool now, you guys.
Yeah. Well, of course, the Super Bowl is like, it is a really watershed moment, obviously, because it's like the broiest of bros, but there's tons of women watch it. I thought it was kind of funny because basically everyone knows what hot flashes are. I don't know very many people who don't know what hot flashes are, but their premise was they're called medically like vasomotor symptoms, which is kind of like, I don't know that makes anyone.
Do we need that? Yeah.
Right. Like I was joking because I've learned the word for frozen shoulder is adhesive capsulitis. But if you knew that, like, does it make your frozen shoulder any better? Like, no, you just sound smart saying there's gonna be a lot of people walking around saying I have vasomotor. People love to use the proper word, but so that, like, in itself, it was pivotal, driven by a commercial and a pharmaceutical company, whatever. But I can only really speak for me personally, just in mindset. I think I was scared of going through menopause because it's completely associated with aging. I've had a lot of periods in my life where I've been single, and for me, like, there was this fear of, and I hate to say it because I'm not a superficial person, but just of like, I'll hit some wall and any possibility of me meeting anyone, like just a belief that has nothing to do with anything really. Right.
But it comes from society.
Yeah, of course. It's all external. So there was a lot of that wrapped up, and I didn't want to, and I was in perimenopause for probably 6 or 7 years and didn't know. And of course, all the doctors I went to, and you hear this story over and over, that why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't I know that this period is so long? But I also think there was quite a lot of denial. And then when I realized that what was happening, missed a period, you can't argue with that, and started to pay attention to it, every single thing got better. Because you start saying, when anything gets better, when you start to admit look at it, name it, feel it, rather than this lurking, like, yeah, exactly. So, and I said at the beginning about 2.5 years ago, I want to be able to say menopause and have no one get weird. And I feel like that has happened. And maybe it's just my social circle, and poor them having to talk about menopause and hear about it. My friend's husband, you could just see him. He's like, but nothing bad has come from that. But I think still maybe translating down into care, there's a lot of doctors who don't know anything about it. Like, and it's the same with, it's not the same. Trans care is much different, but you're going to the doctor and you're getting a vast different reaction from whoever you're seeing. And if you are of means, or you have money, you can pay for really great private care and find the right doctor, although those women are struggling too. But I don't know.
Yeah, the medical education piece, I'm sure, is where the training.
The medical education piece, but then it's turning into quite a commercial thing. And I can't say, like, time will tell. It's always good to name things. I'm really happy, when I see younger women able to talk about having their periods openly and, say, and really, learning their menstrual cycle and not expecting to be like, perform at the top of their game for 30 days of the month, which I forced myself to, and everything I read told me I had to do that. Those things are all really positive. So, hopefully it will happen, hopefully, but it's an interesting time. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the controversy. When I was in Canada, I left Canada in 2008, and the year before I did a big feature, on the trans community in Ottawa, where I was living. And I was saying to everyone, you guys, this is the next like human rights frontier. This is like the next thing. And my editors were very squeamish. It's like a tabloid right-wing newspaper. I was sort of their lefty voice, and they were like, and I was like, no, we have to do it. So they gave me tons of, well, listen, then I left the country, and then they said, you want to run it here? Like, do you want to stop it? And I regret more than anything not saying, no, I'll stop it, and just taking it with me and putting it somewhere that would care, because then I left the country and they ran it in like little bit, like they ran it all small everywhere. And all the people I interviewed were obviously upset, because I spent 6 months like hanging out with them. And anyway, I was in Abu Dhabi, and I always felt really bad about it, because I spent so much time and it wasn't talked about then. And I've spent a lot of years since having arguments with my friends, because it's one of those things where it's in the last, I'm over here too, so I'm sort of sheltered. We don't, there's trans people all over the place in the UAE, but it's sort of illegal, But the conversations over cocktails or whatever, if you're talking about the trans issue, the next thing is, would you think the government should pay for someone's surgery? Like, it just goes from 0 to like 150.
Right.
And then now I've noticed it's gone from 0 to pronouns. Like, do you think you should be forced? And I just feel like I left the country before the conversation started. And now I'm trying to like look at it, and things seem really scary and angry and hard and awful. And how is that there? Is it as loud and upsetting as it seems looking in?
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, there are people who have moved their trans kids from Texas to Connecticut because of fear that the state would take the kids away. Because the parents are, honoring the kid and who they are, and getting them appropriate medical care. So that, I think, for parents of trans kids, it's terrifying. Supportive parents. But yeah, there's just a lot of it, not unlike critical race theory, in quotations. These, they're issues that the right has found to be things that piss people off. So trans stuff, race stuff. So they're like, we're gonna, talk about this, and we're gonna talk about it with schools, and we're gonna talk about how it threatens America, or how it threatens girls and women. And then we're gonna make you mad and try to get your votes. But the impact it has on communities and on families, I think, is really terrible. There's actually a school opening in New Haven that's one of only 4 in the US. They should be opening up in the fall, called the Proud Academy. but their whole identity is around, you don't have to obviously be a queer student or a teacher to work there or to go to school there. But it's centered around, embracing everybody's differences in particular. But it's going to be a private school. And of course, like the US is like wild. So, some places are very affirming. There are laws supporting people's transition, or just, who they are, places where it's relatively easy to change your name, things like that. And then places where it's close to being criminalized, and where there's just such fear of violence and repercussion, and which puts, like, of course, teachers in really weird spots, because as a teacher, you want to honor students and who they are, but do you have to out a kid to their parents? And can you get fired for, using these? It's like a lot of very, as I'm talking about it, I mean, just authoritarian policing of speech and language and identity. And I've been off of social media now for about a year and a half, maybe, because it just like I know what's going on out there. I read the news. I work on a college campus, but having the constant sort of reminder and the constant agitation of social media was just like too much for me. And certainly as an artist, it takes up too much of my mental space, and it can just be paralyzing with how rough things are. But I especially think, there are comparably so few of us, I mean, maybe like, let's say 1% of the population. Medical care is not that expensive. It really isn't. And I remember there was a study of the US military that spends more on Viagra than they do on transgender healthcare. It came out a few years ago. And it's like, many people have very expensive medical care, trans or not,
because they haven't taken care of themselves too sometimes. I mean, it's like, but even when people used to say, like, right away, do you think the government should pay for surgery? I'd say, yeah, because it's not very many people, and it's the right thing to do. It's not, everyone's always, remember the argument used to be against gay marriage, like, well, then you can go marry your dog or whatever. I remember people saying, it's like, okay, well, I don't think that's going to be much of a problem. But this is like, there's not that many people. Why not? But why everyone always takes the tiny thing? Everyone always seizes on, and it happens in just work conversation. It happens with anything new. It's like they seize on the little thing that isn't really a problem to, like, negate the thing that they can't wrap their head around in their mind or something.
Right. Yeah. And then trans sports too. The trans youth are or trans people in general, talking about people as predators and like coming into bathrooms, like making girls unsafe. And, meanwhile, trans people are bullied and assaulted at way higher rates than non-trans people, especially trans women, trans feminine people. So that is just like a total flip. And then this whole idea of, again, there's just so few of us, but there are so many trans youth who struggle in so many ways and who feel excluded in so many ways. And then this focus on, not allowing girls to participate in sports, like what a major thing, especially in the US, that people do to create community. And there was just recently a trans male swimmer at Yale who won. And all of a sudden, then it's like, wait a second. Well, we're concerned about people who were born assigned male at birth. We're worried about that, their testosterone advantage. But then here's this person who's technically supposed to be at a disadvantage, right? But he just won in their league in the 50 free. So, there's that piece. But again, we only care about the trans athletes if they win, not the many who don't.
Right.
And it's just so few. but I think we're lacking, I don't know, there's just so much like cheerleading around, like, yeah, let's protect our kids and not account for trans people in the world, or let's protect our kids by keeping trans girls out of sports. And then people really rally behind that.
Yeah.
And it just, it feels awful to be part of a community that's being used as a wedge issue.
Yeah, that's a good point. This seems in left field from following on now, but I'm just wanted to know about your medical care. Like, how has it been for you?
Oh yeah, I would love to talk about that. So I started transition in Wisconsin at student health, basically at the University of Wisconsin Madison, and my doctor was had a trans son, actually, who was a little older than me, or a little younger than me, but in his 20s or 30s. And that was wonderful. My other doctor outside of student health said, I don't know anything about this. I don't know. I mean, I can learn, I can try to do some research, or you can just go see this other doctor who has training. So I said, and which I really appreciated.
Yeah.
The fact that she wasn't judgy in any way, but she was honest about her limitations, which I think is important. So I started there. And then when I was looking for jobs, I was looking for a state that would have protections for my partner and I and our future family, that would have just protections for trans people in general. Like I didn't want daily life to be harder than it had to be. And then, so we moved to New Haven, Connecticut, and there's actually a medical practice here that was set up by a trans woman, medical director. They particularly focus on HIV care, queer people, trans people, and they do both primary care and hormone checkups. So that has been amazing. I like where just going to the doctor, there's no barrier to entry for just the regular doctor. Other specialties, that's a different situation. But that has just been incredible because I feel like everyone is like, to just, I don't even know how to explain it, but going to the doctor would take a lot of mental and emotional energy before, but everything's in alignment. They are used to all the queer people. I usually learn new pronouns when I go to the doctor. Every room just has, I don't know, it just is a home space, clinical, and also like, and they have a pharmacy, so I don't have to deal with riffraff at the other pharmacies.
Yeah. I've heard that's a big problem. Is the riffraff.
It is a big, it is a big, so it's really like their whole mission is serving our community, and man, it makes me not want to leave.
Right.
I get spoiled where it's not a big deal if I have any type of physical issue, trans related or not, and most issues, are not, frankly, then I know that I can get care and I don't have to explain anything. I'm not abnormal in that space.
I bet there's some doctors there who know about the menopause experience. I bet
they do. I should ask.
Yeah.
And then let you know.
I'm glad you have that. It's hard to go to the doctor. It's hard to go to the doctor anyway. Yeah. Well, maybe someday. Listen, I really appreciate speaking to you. Thank you for answering all my questions. I'm going to think of questions all night, but
yeah, I probably will too. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you. How was